Hey, what's up everybody? It's Ryan with RNG Products. Welcome back to the channel. And as most of you know, my wife and I welcomed our first baby little boy about 4 months ago. So today's project is going to be another project geared towards something in his room. I've already made the picture clip frame and I have a link to that video down below if you haven't checked that one out. Really neat idea, very easy project. Our little boy's been sleeping pretty good, but my wife recently picked up one of those white noise makers. And we started out with one of the smaller battery operated units, but it just wasn't loud enough and it was eating batteries like crazy. So she went and bought one that actually plugs into the wall. And now of course we need a little shelf to set this on. So like everything I do, I can't just make something real simple. I've got to make it complicated. And while looking around the shop, when we were setting up the room, we had found this cool little sign, "Don't wake the bear." And we were never able to incorporate it into the room. We just wanted to kind of keep the room minimalistic. So anyhow, the point of today's video is I'm going to make some type of shelf that will incorporate this sign and it's gonna hold the white noise maker. So let's look around the shop, let's see what type of scraps I have, let's see what we come up with. After looking around the scraps in my shop, I decided that a floating type shelf would be the direction I wanted to go with this project. And to start it off with, I simply grabbed a 1x10 piece of whitewood I had left over from another project. Now, I always like to double check the squareness on my dimensional lumber that I pick up from the big box stores. After all, I am going to frame the perimeter of this shelf with a mitered cut. And if I'm not square from the beginning, it's just gonna be a nightmare. I cut my shelf down to about 19 inches, dropped a couple bench dogs in the workbench, and hit it with some 120 just to knock down the rough edges. In order for me to achieve my floating shelf look, I found this scrap piece of 1x4 barnwood. Again, you can pick this stuff up pre-finished at your local hardwood stores. And I can almost guarantee you, anytime you work on a project with miters, you're bound to make some type of mistake. So make sure you measure twice and cut once, or have a little extra material on hand. Now, just a quick tip, it doesn't matter which compound miter saw you have. If you haven't taken the time to properly set it up and make sure everything's aligned and square, you will for sure find out the hard way once you try to line up these 45 miter cuts. I personally really like these varathane wood stains, and for this project I decided to use a combination of weathered gray and carbon gray. The weathered gray is a little bit lighter, and once you come over the top of it with that carbon gray, it's going to really give you more of that distressed wood look. Now, I wanted this sign to fit flush, and unfortunately it had these two metal tabs sticking out the backside. So I felt the best way to tackle this was lay the sign out, mark up the area where the tabs were, then grab a 1/8 inch 2-flute downward spiral in mill, drop that in my trim router, and then set the correct depth and carefully plunge cut into the wood, and then route out the area I had marked out. Now, this pocket doesn't have to be very precise. We need just enough of a pocket that the sign can drop down in there and fit nice and flush. Double check to make sure the tabs fit down in there flush. If everything checks out okay, flip your workpiece over, rinse and repeat. Now, I don't use hot glue very often, but when I do, I break out my Ryobi battery-powered glue gun. And if you haven't used one yet, this thing's awesome. I went ahead and filled both pockets up with an ample amount of glue, dropped in the sign, held it in place for a couple seconds, and let that hot glue set up. This worked out perfect. And just a quick friendly reminder, if you elect to choose the barnwood from a big box store, wood glue will not stick to any type of a stained surface, so make sure you sand that down before trying a glue up. From here on out, the process is pretty straightforward. Put your first piece on, clamp it in place, and I'm just using my brad nailer to hold it in place while the glue sets up. And as always, if you have some excess glue squeeze out, now's the time to clean it up. Much harder to clean it up later. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, now's when you're going to find out whether or not your miter saw is set up to cut nice and true. Just take your time and don't make any big cuts. It's always easier to leave more material and then slowly remove that material until you get the nice exact fit and finish you're looking for. And I truly can't say enough good things about these Ryobi cordless brad nailers. You'll see me using a combination of a pin nailer and brad nailer for this project. Now, I'm a big fan of using a hidden French cleat mounting system whenever I can, and considering this was such a lightweight project, I really thought that would be a very effective way to mount this on the wall and make it look like a floating shelf without having to have some big metal rods. Now, sometimes our ideas don't always work out, so make sure you watch the end of this video. Now over to the shelf, little wood glue and a couple brad nails. Now for some pilot holes in the French cleat part that will mount to the wall. Well, as you guys can see, I'm back here at the workbench and the shelf looks a little different than the previous shots. So here's the reality. Sometimes ideas just don't work out. In my head, the French cleat idea I thought was gonna work. I thought I had enough length here on the floating shelf that once that French cleat dropped in, that these edges would hold it against the wall. It technically worked, but at the end of the day, this is going in my little kid's room. And once we put the white noisemaker on it, I just wasn't satisfied with it. And that left me in a little bit of a pickle. I'd already glued and brad nailed the French cleat piece, as you saw earlier. So I just basically regrouped, tried to figure out what I could do to salvage it. Grabbed a skill saw. I just grabbed my jigsaw, put a bimetal blade in it, and I was able to cut down and cut through those brads, sanded it down really quick. So just wanted to share with you guys, things don't always work out. So I know a lot of people think, you know, makers on YouTube are perfect and they don't make mistakes. For me personally, I like to kind of show you the process, and you don't always hit a home run on it. But the good news is I simply took a 1x2 and studs are 16 on center, so I got pretty lucky that these will fit right within where I want it. Drilled and countersunk those. I'm gonna put a little stain on it. And quick fix, I'm gonna put this up on the wall, run some 3-inch screws into the studs. Then we'll take the shelf, put it on the top, slip it over like so. Once that's in there, I'm gonna run some 2.5-inch screws through here. And again, I'm just putting a small picture frame and a little white noisemaker on there, and that should hold it. So if you were inspired by this video and you want to make something like this in the future, I would recommend this type of installation, as the French cleat didn't work out too well. I didn't want to leave that in the video clip and have somebody make this thing and run into the same problem that I had. And as always, guys, I really appreciate everybody's comments and support for this channel. We reached our goal. We're up over 2,000 subscribers now. If you're new to the channel, feel free to hit that subscribe button right here. And as always, those that are subscribed, if you can smash that like button, that also does me a really big favor, and it really helps grow the channel so I can keep making these videos and bringing them to you guys. I also really want to know what everybody thinks about this project. I personally love the way it came out, and drop a comment below and we'll catch you guys on the next video.
Let's sing a song full of hope, full of pain. Why don't you sing along, my friend, for it's our last refrain. Forever young, ever strong, ever brave.